I'm Doris Eagan, and I was Cora May Roush, Montague, granddaughter, the youngest one in the family. I've got to put that in.
See, she's trying to let people know she's younger than me.
That's where I came from. That was the beginning.
Your Aunt Code's
Granddaughter, yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to think how this got together.
Yes.
Her mother was
Crystal
Devereux,
Yeah.
and she was my mother's sister, the only sister she had.
And she married George Devereux. Yeah, and I have four sisters. I had four sisters. Now, it's the end of it.
You have any kids?
You did the end of it.
I married Marilyn Eagan, and we had 3 children. One is a teacher, Marilyn. She teaches kindergarten. And my son runs the business. We have an equipment business in Ogden, Utah. And Boyd is a New York Life salesman. I have 11 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. Plus the ones that have married into the family, I have 5. And all my sisters are married. Yvonne's gone. They've all died. And do you want me to tell their names?
Yeah.
Mildred married Vern Stonehawker. She was 10 years younger than I was. And Bernice was 12 years older than I was, and she married Lee Coleman. They have 1 child. Mildred had 3, and Yvonne had 3. And Yvonne's grandson, or her son, passed away last year, and her oldest daughter's gone. She just has 1 living, and the rest of the younger ones are alive. Bernice died with Alzheimer's, and
She's the one you went to see.
Anyway, I guess that's it.
And she didn't know you.
You don't know me. Dorothy Molczyk. I used to be Dorothy Wendt. My mother was Edith Humphrey, and she was Aunt Catherine's sister. And I married George Molczyk, and we've been married 46 years yesterday.
Oh, right.
And I've got 4 children of my own and 2 foster children, and they're all married, and 21 grandchildren. Right now, most of them are coming back from Black Hills. They're all on vacation, and they're coming home.
Heim. And my mother was Nina Montague Haggard, and she was Crystal Devereux's only sister. I didn't have any brothers and sisters, so Doris and Yvonne and Mildred and Bernice were my sisters. And we lived pretty close on farms when we were growing up, so we could, do a lot together, visit a lot. And my grandmother is what these girls call Aunt Code, Cora May Roush. And she was Cora Monroe before she was married. She was married, the first time she was married was to Christy Montague. And my mother was, when my mother was born, she only weighed 3 pounds. And she had come home to her grandmother's and was born there in Hanson, Nebraska. And her mother and father lived out in McCook, and in those days that was a long while ago. And so she said, well, this baby's too small for you to take back home with you, and I'll keep her till she gets older. And she kept her in a shoebox on the oven door and raised Mom. Well, Mom was only 7 months old, and they hadn't come back after her. And her father was a brakeman on the train, and it was a cold morning in November, and he was up on top of the train when they used to have those wheels up on top they had to turn, and that wheel broke off and he fell down between the cars and was killed. And so Mother never left her grandparents, they raised her.
He was a handsome guy, wasn't he?
I guess he was.
No, I didn't know all that.
You didn't?
No. See, Merlin was Merlin
And
only weighed
he
3.5 pounds.
He
Yeah,
died.
deep enough, you'll find out a lot of stuff about this
Yeah.
outfit.
I wonder if I should stay.
He died on your mother's birthday.
Yeah, I
right?
knew
Yeah,
that,
he
but
died
I
on
didn't know your
mother's
mother. I
birthday.
didn't know.
And
Who took her?
hmm?
Who took her and raised? Oh, Grandma
Grandpa
Monroe.
Monroe raised him. And Grandma Rush, my mother and Aunt Crystal's mother, did sewing for people. And she came and stayed at Grandpa and Grandma Rush, Grandpa and Grandma Monroe's when she could. But she'd go and sew clothes for the whole family. And so she'd be gone several weeks at a time, men and women's clothes and everybody's. In those days, they didn't have the stores to go buy button clothes. And so she wasn't there so much. So their grandparents really raised Mother and Aunt Crystal. And that was Grandpa and Grandma Monroe. Now, you want to know who else I am now?
I never knew Grandma Monroe because
No, well, she died when Mother wasn't
I think
around.
Leslie was a baby.
Uh-huh.
You
And,
aren't one of the characters in the new Batman movies, are you?
huh?
You're not one of the characters from one of the new Batman movies or anything.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Anyway, I don't get their money. What they
It'd be
were.
nice.
Well, I married Murray Heim, and he was in the service here, and he's in Grand Island, and then he was stationed in Kearney, and that's where I met him. And we went to the same church, and my aunt on my dad's side lived out there, and she always took my dear friend that taught out there with me also, and me home on Sunday for dinner, and a couple of soldier boys. And that's how I met my husband. She always said she picked out my husband. And I have we have two sons. Eldon lives here in Grand Island, our older son, and Joel is our younger son. He is an ordained minister, and he and his wife are just finishing up their doctorate degrees. They're just finishing their dissertations, and they're moving, let's see, a week from Sunday they'll be through here. They're moving to Wisconsin, and it's close to where Grandpa Monroe was from, where he moved to Nebraska from. So isn't that interesting?
Goes around, comes around.
And I have 8 grandchildren, and I'm really young, so I don't have any great grandchildren.
So am I. Yeah,
And
that's what I
Grandpa
was
had her in the wagon. She lost her shoe over there.
I thought it was Aunt
That
Nina.
was my
Aunt
mom.
Nina.
Well,
I
then
thought
Mother
it
got the
was.
story wrong.
I
That was
thought
what
it
I'd always
was-
heard, that it was Grandma when she was a baby.
When she was a baby.
Yeah,
I am
I know.
Catherine Shaver.
I know.
I was born
And
Catherine
Mother,
Humphrey,
she had it. Yeah, on
the
horse,
daughter of
and
George
had
and Nina
One of
Humphrey.
one of the kids on the horse.
My mother's name was Monroe.
And her neighbors.
Her name was Nancy, but they always called her Nina, and I think it was because people couldn't pronounce Nancy. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister. And Maynard was my oldest brother. Edith was my sister. Leslie was my little brother. And then I came along. And this old Dutchman said that I was a little accident. So my Uncle Ed always called me Little Accident. When I was 19, I married Bill Shaver. We had 5 children. Bill, Nancy, Julie, Roberta, and Tommy. I have 19 grandchildren and 33 great-grandchildren and 2 great-great-grandchildren.
See, I told you I was younger. I don't have any.
And I guess I did what I was supposed to do. multiplied and replenished the earth. Anyway, when I was 7 years old, my mother died, and I went to live with my Grandpa Humphrey and 2 aunts, Gertrude and Blanche. Dad married when I was 10 years old to Cora Gunther. Her name was Bishop when she was a young woman. She had 1 daughter, Bernice Gunther. She was 7 years older than I. Guess that's the end of it.
I forgot to tell him I was the baby sitting on Grandpa Monroe's lap.
I got that picture.
A picture that people didn't know.
Ah.
I didn't know it till Margaret.
Great-Grandpa Monroe and Doris when she was a baby, Doris
Said, you
Eagan.
know, I got the brains in our family.
Then
And I says, what'd you do with them?
I'm going to get
I'm awful naughty.
Okay, this is Great-Grandpa Monroe and Great-Grandma Monroe on their 50th wedding anniversary. And Uncle Henry Hudson and Aunt Mari Hudson, that's Grandpa Monroe's sister, are with them, and they stood up with them at their wedding 50 years before. And this is a picture of Grandpa and Grandma Monroe's 50th anniversary.
They didn't celebrate because they had
Uh,
a death in the family.
She doesn't say. Mom doesn't say. She wrote it. Now here she says Grandma Monroe died in 1911. So you see, you weren't very old.
No, I was
Did you get that?
But, now Leslie,
They were married in 1861, and this was 50 years later. So it would be 19 what?
Which one?
This
the
is
Prairie Fire lady with the shoe in the Prairie Fire.
these two. She was riding the horse, holding the baby that the shoes from.
She's on the lower right-hand side of the picture.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's Great-Grandpa and Grandma Monroe.
I get my fatness
Yeah.
from.
It runs in the family.
Where we all
We
do.
can't be blamed. It runs in our genes.
This is Uncle George Monroe. He was Grandpa Monroe's oldest son, wasn't it?
He's on the.
Was Uncle
left-hand-
Irv older than Uncle George? Yeah, Uncle Irv was older.
He's on the left-hand side.
Yeah,
of the picture.
he's on the left-hand side of the picture. And this is his wife
On the viewer's left.
in the middle here. And that is my grandmother that they call Aunt Code.
Between them two.
Uh-huh. And this is Aunt Carrie Funk. She's
He was a mean old
lady.
devil.
She was a sister to my grandmother and Uncle George Monroe.
I was scared to death of her.
Yeah, she was a crabby old thing.
You know, I went into
And the rest of them are Uncle George, or several of them are Uncle George and Aunt Tide, we always called her. Her name was Ida, but Aunt Crystal couldn't say Ida when she was little and called her Tide, so that's what she was called all her life. And this is their children. They're girls. And Leonelle is in the middle, and she was a cripple. When she was 9 years old, she was on a hay rack with her daddy and been out in the field, and she jumped off the hay rack from the top of the hay rack it was full of hay, and injured her spine, and she never walked. She never walked after that. She was always on crutches. And then I think she did for a little while. Then there's Marie and her husband on the left.
Marie's still living.
No, none of them are. No, none of them are. And then
She had a school teacher.
Linnell, and then next is Arlene. She was the last to die, Cope. Dorothy isn't in this picture either, their youngest one. She died first, and then they had an older son, Merle, and they're all dead. Arlen was the last one to die, and
know these, but they told me that they weighed a half a ton, 1,000 pounds among the four of them. That's where we girls get our nice plumpness from.
I think they were good cooks.
But they were good-looking girls, weren't they?
And
One
Catherine
was
used to always say we were all
Cordelia
well-reared
Teachout
and good understanding.
and
That's what
Minerva James and Carolyn Alden, and she was Grandma Monroe's twin sister, Catherine Monroe.
Catherine was a twin, and so was my mom.
And let's
Did
see.
you know my mom was a twin?
Oh, yes, I know that.
And
I'll tell the story of what your mom said one time. When she was a little girl, her sister died quite young, and her sister's name was Nellie. And her father told her to do something, and she said, "How do you know nine may be dead and this is Nellie? I don't want to do it."
Nellie Cordelia. Yeah, your mother told me about my mom. There was an old lady. There was an old lady that was always so snoopy. And my mom was doing her laundry on a board, and she had these undershirts like ladies wore in those days. And this old lady was sitting there watching Mom. And she says, "Nine, how long do you wear your undershirt?" She said, "Just a little bit below my..."
Great-Grandpa Monroe that raised my mother, Nina Haggard, and Crystal Devereaux. And the one they thought so very much of. The one on the left is Nina, my mother's baby picture. The next one is, the middle one is Crystal, and the one on the right is their little brother Willie that died when he was 2 years old, before my mother was born.
Oh, that was little Willie that's buried over there to
Hanson. Now this is a picture of both Grandpa and Grandma Monroe, Great-Grandpa and Grandma Monroe, that raised my mother and Aunt Crystal.
I said I was a
Grandchildren. This is great-Grandma Monroe. This is my great-grandfather Monroe's mother. And she lived with Grandpa and Grandma Monroe while my mother and Aunt Crystal were growing up. And she was born in 1821 and died in 1903. And Mother used to say that she could remember her reading her Bible, and she'd say, "Well, I'll not live to see it, but there will be horseless carriages. It says so in the Bible." Mom and Dad, their 50th anniversary.
Oh, am I supposed to be talking? I usually talk too much. This is
I've done too
On
much
my
talking.
chest of drawers is a picture of my dad and Mom on their wedding day.
Oh.
In my bed.
I want to see.
This is my mother, Crystal Monroe, Montague, or whatever, and George Devereaux on their 50th wedding anniversary. The one, which would be the one on my right, is Yvonne. She's the oldest,
Pretty.
and then
She sure was.
Bernice is on the far left,
She didn't ever get heavy.
and
like the
Mildred
rest of them.
is next to the
She was sick
right,
so much.
and then it's myself.
My Aunt Blythe said she
They
had
celebrated
the
their
most beautiful
61st
hands.
before they died,
Yeah.
but this was the 50th.
My dad was a good-looking
Oh,
man.
yeah.
When were they married?
I-
Oh, no, either.
I know
Yeah.
Dad and Mom were probably married in Hanson. And her bridesmaid was Edith Rood. And that's why Edith was named, my sister was named Edith. I don't know how many years my dad and mom were married, but it must have been legal because they had us 4 kids. Oh, Brummel. He loved to dress up.
He did. He always looked neat.
And that's when my dad had hair. I'll tell you something funny. One time, my dad always was bald-headed as long as I knew him. And when he started dating Cora, he got a toupee. And he came over to see me, and he had a toupee, and I started crying because I didn't think it was my dad. And you know, whenever I had a date and Dad took that darn thing off, he'd put it on the buffet, and I'd rush in and hide it before my boyfriend came in. I didn't want him to know my dad had one of those.
I can remember.
When I go through those pictures, I want to...
Yeah.
We had a picture of taken of all of the grandchildren, you and, you know, my kids and Janine and all of us, out in front of Grandpa's house on 6th.
Oh, I'd like to have a copy of that.
There. Well, when I go through, we'll...
Yeah.
You know when your mother was born? This is her mother's record. Your mother.
That's my mother?
1884.
In 1876.
1876. Oh, that's yeah. Well, I've got 1875 now.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. And Nancy's twin Nellie died in infancy. But Nancy was married, it says here, in 1893. When your mother was married.
I need a pen.
See, Maynard was 20 years older than I.
You could take this home, Dorothy, and drop
Everybody.
it off.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
I was going to tell you, Edith went to Hastings to get her wedding shoes, and she took me with her because they always took me along because my mom was sick, you know. And Edith, and she said to this young man, she says, "I'm buying my wedding shoes today," so pretty soon I says,
1893.
"Mama," and she says, "I'm not your mama." And I says, "You are too, my mama."
Embarrass
that
my mother
guy-
to tears.
That's true. I was.
Yeah,
so
why don't you
hungry,
take this home?
Oh,
You
I'd
could
love
cop-
to.
You get what you want there.
Okay.
I'll give you those sheets back. And there's a bunch of it written down here that I've written down too, so on paper here you can look at. Okay.
I'm wondering what's going to happen to all of this when we're gone.
Oh, I've worked on this stuff for so many years, trying to get all this information together. I thought, well, I'd put it all in a book and get it together, you know. But every time you turn around, there's something else to add to it.
It's different.
It's different and something else. And I'd like to have a copy of that little picture
Here's
up
Mother's
there.
baptism.
Get it?
Here's Mother's baptism
Oh, goodness.
certificate.
Didn't my mom have a little waist?
Yeah,
I've got
her
grandmother's.
wedding gloves.
Goodness, look at that. Ooh, she wasn't any.
Yeah,
She was really little.
I bet she was laced in.
probably.
Oh, yes.
But her hand must have been awfully long and thin, because I've got her wedding glove, and I put it in a frame, and I put on the back whose it was and all.
And Blanche said she had the most beautiful hands.
Yeah, I'll
Well,
let you-
there's her gloves.
My funny joke.
Yeah,
That
that
doesn't
was
have
a funny
any,
joke.
that doesn't have anything to do with family. It's Nebraska. I don't know her, but a friend of mine knows her real well. And she has 3 children. They were ages 2 and 5 and 6, and they all got the chicken pox this spring. And Of course, they didn't all get at the same time, you know. One was about well, and the next one got them, the next one. Well, they were shut in so long, and the children were getting so tired that she promised them when they got well and didn't have any more scabs on their faces and things, she'd take them to Henry Darley Zoo down to Omaha. Well, one nice day this spring, they all got well, and she kept her promise, and she put, I don't know why her husband didn't go with her, but she had a little red Volkswagen, and she took the children and went to the Henry Darley Zoo. Well, it was real busy that day, and she had a hard time finding a parking place. Well, there were 2 utilities trucks there working on the power lines, and there happened to be a parking place between them, and she looked to see if there was any sign that said no parking, and didn't, so she just pulled in there and parked, and they went on to the zoo. Well, when she came out, the trucks were gone, and her car was there, but the front top of the what do you call it? Not radiator. The hood of the car was all dented in. And she thought, well, maybe one of those fellows dropped a pole on it. But they weren't there, and she was just standing there wondering. And the fellow came out from the zoo, and he said, don't worry, lady. We've got insurance, and we'll fix your car back just as good as new. But he said, I had one of my helpers take the elephant out for a walk to exercising, and he had the elephant had been in a circus, and he always sat down on a red stool, and he saw that Volkswagen, and he sat down on it, and he bedded it in. So that was, and he said, but we'll take care of it, and he wrote down her name, and they got all the business taken care of. So she and the children started back to Plattsmouth. And on the way to Plattsmouth, they came on an accident that had happened. And the sheriff and the patrolman and everybody were there, and you couldn't get through. The highway was clogged, so she just pulled over to the side and stopped and waited. Well, finally they got the road open where traffic could go on through, and they waved them on through. So she went on down the road. She got a half a mile, and here came the sheriff, his red lights a-flashing, and he stopped her. She stopped. And he said, don't you ever leave the site of an accident. And she said, well, I wasn't a part of that accident. I was just waiting to go on by. And he said, don't tell me that. Look at the hood of your car. Do you expect me to believe that?
No one else.
And she said, no, it didn't happen in this accident. An elephant sat on it. And he said, and you expect me to believe that too? And he gave her, and she said, well, you can call the zoo, and they'll tell you that it's true. But he gave her a sobriety test before he called. And he called the zoo, and they affirmed that it was right. An elephant had sat on her car. And that's the story. That really happened.
Edith and I went downtown one day, and I was driving, and I parked it over a Locust Street. There wasn't anyone parked there when we parked in, and so we went shopping, and we came back, and there was a car parked right next to me. So I backed up, and Edith says, Catherine, you're taking that other car along with you. My car was hooked onto the bumper, and I was bringing the other car. We laughed over that.
Took it along with you and brought it home. It just followed you home like the puppy dog, huh?
I'll tell you, that was so dumb.
Well, you found out a little bit about
That happened in Salt Lake, but the lady kept thinking, gee, that guy's following me.
On our porch over at 512 West 6th, and we had some pillars. And I said, Bill, you're kind of agile because you carry so much meat and stuff. I says, go 5 spans up the pole. And he did it. I said, now put your knee up there. He did it. I said, now lean over and touch the porch. He did it. I said, now bark like a dog. And he said, I thought you were a nice girl. I don't get that. And
I'd have pulled it over on him, didn't he?
Yeah, it must have run in the family. I'm Doris Eagan again, and my husband died 13 years ago. I went to help my sis for a while, but now I've the last 5 years I've been more confined at home. I live in Ogden, Utah, 984 Henderson. I have a farm equipment business. My son runs for me, and was left by my husband, William Eagan, and as I say, he's gone 13 years.
Went to Utah.
Because Bernice and Lee were transferred to Ogden from Sacramento. That's my sister. And Mother and Dad, George and Crystal, came out at the, I was transferred up to Ogden with my job, and Mother came out to stay with me, and then Dad came out when Bernice and Lee went back for a trip. Anyway, that's how we all got out there. And then Mildred came to follow us. So that's how we got to Utah. And that's about it of it.
Mildred and the girls used to take me to Sunday school in that buggy. They had an old horse named Bill. And we'd go to Sunday school with that. That
Horse
was more
named Bill.
I used to kid Bill. I says, boy, my cousins had a horse named Bill.
I wonder if that's the one Mother took to the Platte River with her to pick my dad up. They was up there playing. They were having a poker game on Sunday morning, and they were supposed to go to a picnic, and he didn't come home, so she hitched this horse up to the buggy and went after him because he had the car. When she got there, the seats were out of the car. They were all sitting around there, and she went up real quiet, and she got in the car and stepped on the starter, and she said the money and everything, they all stood up, and the money just flew all over creation.
Poker game.
And she made Ben Flair come and bring the seats back so she could go back home, and he wasn't going to do it, so she raced to they came to Grand Island to Shimmers Lake, on a picnic that day, and Bernice had just got out of the hospital, and when she was driving out of the driveway, we had quite a long driveway, when she was driving out of the driveway, Dad came in and she said, you better get somebody to do your cooking for the Thrashers tomorrow, because I won't be here.
She gave up.
You know,
Right.
we used to meet at Shimmers Lake. The folks from Hanson and all those places would come to Shimmers Lake from one way, and we'd come on the old St. Joe and Grand Island Railroad and meet them out there.
I wonder if, I went there once into a summer cabin. I don't remember, it was screened in. I wonder, it must have been your place that we went to.
That was fun.
Yeah, they used to have grocery picnics out there too. Remember those?
Then we used to go to Aunt Carrie's for Uncle Irv's birthday, which was the 4th of July.
What's the other
Well, Mom, let's have your...
Why she always
Oh,
had
I'm
good
retired
food.
from everything. After all my kids are gone, that was my life work, raising my kids. So I'm retired. Now all I got to do is see that my grandkids get around. But yeah. No, he was easy. No, I do sewing. I do a lot of crafts. Keep busy, do crossword puzzles. I can't stand to sit around and do nothing, so I've got a whole room with nothing but my crafts in it.
great.
And I right now my biggest project is making these baby cocoons, we call them. And they go over top of the baby carriers, and they've got a little flap that comes up to, you can check on the baby, and you cover them up in the wintertime that way, and keeps them nice and warm and cozy.
Nice.
I've sold quite a few of them, so.
Do you remember the pretty bonnets I gave Paula? That were my little girl's bonnets.
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh, I bet you Paula'd remember because they were so beautiful.
Where's Paula live?
Paula lives in Oregon.
Here.
That's why she wanted to know who all had cancer.
I'll never forget Tommy and Paula were ring bearers and flower girl at Dorothy's wedding. And they were a little late getting the pictures taken, and those kids got as sturdy as could be. They had little,
Great Jews.
all my, Tommy Joe had a little white suit, and Paula had a little long dress. And by the time they took pictures, Billy looked like he was,
Tommy crawled all over top of the
I don't
car
mean
and
Billy, Tommy.
Great Jews saw him.
Tommy
We
looked,
got all the colors off in the picture, though. Didn't you?
Tommy just looked like a little ragmuffin.
She was so upset that she just knew that it never looked good in the picture.
Your mother died
Catherine,
with
could you
breast
tell us a little
cancer.
bit about
No, not her mother.
Her,
Catherine?
Catherine's mother.
Her mother, yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your present living situation? You know, what you're doing with your time and what you're interested in, and how you occupy yourself?
What are you doing to keep busy now?
Who?
You.
What do I do to keep busy?
Yeah.
I go down to the lobby and tell them stories, and
She'll have another one too.
True ones or not?
Yeah.
they said they never had so much fun until I moved in.
And my husband and I had the upholstering shop, and we are still, it's our son's now, we gave it to him, but we still work in it. But we're about to retire for about the second or third time.
Yeah,
And-
she lives a few blocks away from me, and I didn't even know it.
And I keep my grandchildren a lot. But this is Grandpa Monroe's homestead papers.
Oh, golly.
Sure.
I think I got it.
This is, I suppose it's a copy of the homestead paper that Grandpa Monroe, that was given to Grandpa Monroe when he came here and homesteaded a quarter section of land in Township 8, and it was down by Hanson, Nebraska, and the President of the United States at that time was Rutherford B. Hayes, and it is signed by him, and it was the 20th day of February, 1880, the year. And let's see, Independence one.
So the money went to us 4 kids. And Aunt Carrie had a fit.
They had an awful fight over that will.
Oh, she
Money.
wrote the nastiest letter to my dad because of that. And Grandpa, I guess he left just $1 to Irv and $1 to Carrie.
They had a
did.
fight. They had a fight while he was in the hospital too, and they
When he-
wouldn't let him see him.
And he gave Mother and Aunt Crystal each $2,000 of Grandma Roush's money. And Grandma Roush wouldn't speak to her own daughters for almost a year because they got some of her money.
But you know, the money
You've got this
that was
picture.
my mom's
Go ahead,
went to us 4 kids.
This is a picture of Grandpa Monroe and his brothers and sisters, great Grandpa Monroe.
Just name the numbers.
Okay, number 1
Mary was
On the
married.
bottom.
on the bottom right.
No, Well, that's the way they
Your bottom right.
Yeah, is Aunt Jane Dykeman. And next to her, number 2, is this is their mother, great grandmother Nancy Monroe, that I showed you her picture, that lived with Grandpa and Grandma Monroe when
William Monroe's wife?
his mother.
William Monroe's mother. William Monroe was the guy who had the homestead.
Yes, and
this
he's the
was
one,
his mother.
and that was his mother in the middle.
Okay.
And then the next one was his sister, Mary Rood, and she's the one kind of in the back there. And then this one at the front is Aunt Mara Hudson. That was in their 50th wedding anniversary picture that I showed earlier. And then at the back was Uncle B. Monroe, and he lived in, he was a brother that always lived up in Wisconsin. And then great Grandpa Monroe that we've talked so much about today's in the middle. And the one on this side, no one knows for sure, but great Grandpa Monroe had a brother that was killed in a logging accident in Wisconsin, and I think that must be him.
Okay, does anybody have?
Well, I had that picture,
Well, here.
Dad, Mom, I don't know
A
where.
couple of months ago, his
Dorothy? She said
his
she
daughter
wanted to
came
take that
and wanted some pictures,
and
but
get
the grandparents are gone
copy
now,
of it,
and they
maybe.
don't have any
That
pictures.
homestead.
Well, they came to my place, and Carly went down and found a bunch of the slides and things, and they had pictures made, and they gave them to their dads for Father's Day, and I said, that is the only pictures we have.
We
of
should
our
go
family."
down and get our ice
Ice cream.
cream because
We
they
can
will,
come back and get this stuff.
we can come back.
As Catherine
But isn't that dumb where I put that picture?
This is Uncle Bill Shaver here. This
That
would have
must have
been
been about
probably Golden
32,
Spike
isn't it?
days. Yeah, that was 1932.
And she was dying with this cancer, and I was just a baby, and she said she changed my diaper or something.
It's nice.
It is, very good.
It was the day her polis.
I got
she had a
security.
polis-
That's right, that's right, that's nice.
This is Aunt Carrie Funk Matthews, and she's a sister who's older than somebody. I'm not sure. Just a second. Here we have Crystal Montague Devereaux, grandmother Roush. Cora May Monroe is her name, or Montague Roush, and Aunt Nina Montague Hagenel, I think. This was taken in 1938.